guys. Hey, how are you? It's great to see everyone here. I'm so excited for our guest today. We are going to be going and covering over data security for small businesses. And we have Cathy Miron here. She's the owner of 𝗖𝗍, which is a data security company. I'm going to let her give you a little bit of background about herself and her company, and then we're going to launch right into everything data security. Go ahead, Cathy.
Thanks, 𝗬𝗍. So as she mentioned, I'm the owner and CEO of 𝗖𝗍, and we're a small business data protection and cybersecurity company. We've been around for almost 20 years at this point, but I am newer to entrepreneurship as I only acquired the company back in 2018. So I started my career in corporate America. I worked for GE, so it's one of the larger Fortune 50 companies, or at least at the time it was. And I had spent 8 years doing IT audits and assessing risk and security, backup and compliance for our multinational company in all different corners of the world. So I had this amazing opportunity to travel and see what good IT looks like in large enterprises that have large budgets. And that kind of built the foundation for what I do now here at 𝗖𝗍. So we take a lot of those enterprise grade solutions and boil them down to small business budgets and help small business owners really understand where data security and data protection can go wrong. Unfortunately, we see a lot of business owners just don't have the resources and access to expertise that larger companies have. So unfortunately, they fall victim to really basic security mistakes. So we're on a mission to help bring broader education to the small business community, and of course, help protect their data through backups and preventative tools like security awareness training, smart firewalls, and anything else that they may need.
Right. Nice. Very nice. And so what would you consider to be the most important thing that our audience should know about data security in their small business?
That data loss is preventable. If any of you have ever lost or misplaced a file, had a hard drive crash, had your email hacked, or your computer's compromised, you know, in every one of those scenarios, it's preventable. What I would tell you is that one of the most important things when it comes to security is thinking about prevention, but then also detection and response. So there's a lot of basic things that you can do to make it harder for bad guys to steal your data or to break into your computers. And especially for small businesses, these crimes are all financially motivated, right? The criminals are looking for low-hanging fruit, so unlocked doors and windows, if you want to think about it kind of like a house. And so by putting some basic safeguards in place, you make it that much more difficult for criminals to access your data. So they're going to try the knob, find that it's locked, and move on to the next house. So I think basic prevention strategies are really important, but anyone who tells you that they can guarantee you will never fall victim to a cyber attack is either lying to you or is naive. So large companies with million-dollar budgets and hundreds of security staff still have breaches every day, and you see that in the news, right?
Yes.
Some of the recent ransomware attacks in large cities, hospitals, you know, large even technology companies. So another important aspect of security is how do you quickly detect if something is wrong, if a computer is compromised, if your network is infected, and then respond to that to contain the threat and eliminate it. So there's really kind of two sides to the coin.
Okay. And as far as the prevention for the small business, is there a certain amount of money they should be thinking they need to invest into the data security, or is this something that's very affordable for everyone to be able to do? How does that look for a small business?
It's a little bit of both. So depending on which research institute or publication you look at, they might tell you that somewhere between 5 to 6% of your annual revenue should be spent on IT, so technology in general to do your business. And that's hardware, software, everything. And then within that, others would tell you that maybe 2 to 3% of your annual revenue should be spent, or sorry, of your annual expenses should be spent on cybersecurity. So depending on where your business is at, that might mean that you have a decent sized budget or a very small budget if you're starting out. And what I would tell you is that for smaller businesses that have maybe 1 or 2 people in them, you can be pretty safe with consumer grade tools, right? They're going to be much more affordable. They're going to be much simpler, and they'll match the computer setup that you have, which is you're primarily probably doing everything off of your laptop or your MacBook or what have you. For small businesses that are a bit larger, so they've got 2, 3, 5, 10 people or 50 people, they may or may not have an office, they may or may not have servers, then you really need to start thinking about more small business grade security solutions. And at eSilo, we work with businesses of all sizes. So solopreneurs up to 100, 200 person offices with multiple locations around the country. We really cater to and meet our clients where they are.
Okay. And included in data security, are you also able to get some sort of backup system, an off-site backup system for all of your data as well?
Yes, exactly. So when I had mentioned there's kind of 2 sides to the coin, you know, preventing attacks and then also being able to recover from them after the fact, that's really where data backups come in. So it's important to have offsite backup for your data. That way, in case of a ransomware infection on your machine or malware, or even just something as mundane as a hard drive that crashes or a fire, you know, in your home, you know that you've got a safe copy of that data protected offsite in the cloud with a different provider, and that is available from anywhere. You can simply download the backup, put it onto a new machine you bought from Best Buy, and get off and running in a matter of hours versus days.
Right. Okay. And what would you say is the number one, or let's say the top 3 ways that people get spyware or the viruses or malware into your computer? What are the top 3 ways that that's happening to us?
So number 1 is going to be phishing attacks. So phishing in this case is not, you know, but when somebody crafts a very carefully worded email, looking like it comes from Microsoft or your bank or some acquaintance that you might have met at a networking convention or something, saying, hey, you know, I wrote this article, I want to share it with you, you know, click this link. Or this is one actually I've seen quite a bit. Here's an invoice, you know, here's your receipt for your recent purchase, open this attachment. And so it's malicious attachments and malicious links often coming through email is the number 1 way that computers get infected. If you have good antivirus, anti-malware software running on your machine, that should prevent those types of executables from running. But anti-malware is a whole other conversation that we can have too, because there's old school style and new school, and some are better than others. And especially when you talk about different price points, right, for small businesses.
Right.
So that's a little bit of a side conversation. But I would say phishing in general is the number 1 thing. Secondly, it's compromised account credentials. So if you have an administrator who, you know, uses the same password on all of your servers, or if you're using default passwords on your home router, or reusing passwords across different websites, all it takes is one password to be compromised for that same password that you use for Facebook to then get a bad guy into your bank account or something with your financial system. So proper protection of user accounts and passwords, and being smart about passwords in general, using multi-factor authentication, those are all really important basic controls that everybody can put in place.
Okay, that's good information to know. So let's say you get attacked, and let's say it's like ransomware you were mentioning. Ransomware is basically where someone takes part of your data somewhere on the computer, normally in a file, and then sends you a letter that basically says you can pay them however X amount to get your data back, in case anybody has never experienced that before. So in a case like that, what would the small business owner do? what would be their first step? How could they remedy this?
So very first thing, disconnect all of the computers from the network. Very first thing, because ransomware can move from machine to machine, computer to computer. So if you're in an office setting, and one machine is infected and has their files scrambled with long file names and weird file extensions that you don't recognize, and when you try to open a document, it's all gobbledygook inside, that's a very good indication that your files have been encrypted and you have ransomware. So the first thing to do is disconnect that machine from the network, and as well as all of the other machines if you can. Okay. Then you're going to want to call a security company, right? To ask them, here's the type of ransomware that I think I have. What do I do? Mm-hmm. What should be my next step? And I need your help to cleanse the machines. So calling in the experts, I would say, is the other most important thing. Right. When it comes to recovery of files, you have a couple options. If you can afford it and you want to take the gamble that you'll pay the criminals and they'll actually give you back your data, you can do that. If you, I don't advise it, right? Because you're funding a criminal enterprise. Right. Everyone who pays just encourages them, right, to do it to more people.
Right.
So you can do it, although I would tell you, if you choose to go that route, you can usually negotiate them down. I've had clients be able to negotiate down significantly, so like 10%. They were, a later offer was 10% of the original ransom. They ultimately still chose not to pay it, but you can negotiate. But the second thing that I would be doing in parallel to all of this and trying to contain the issue is call your backup provider, tell them what's happened, and have them begin to prepare to restore your backup. And in that scenario, what you're going to want to do is determine whether or not your security company can forensically clean the infected devices, right? Because the last thing you want to do is put the data back on a bad device because it's inevitable that time will happen again. Or you need to go order replacement equipment. Okay. And then that has its own lead time to get those things in place. So, those are the first couple of steps that I would just do immediately. So back to kind of the options of what do you do? So you either pay the ransom, attempt to recover your data, or I guess the third option is if you don't happen to have a good backup. And I can tell you stories of clients who thought they had a good backup, but then when they got hit with ransomware and attempted to recover, they ran into all kinds of issues. Then the third option is basically agree to lose your data. And I have heard of clients who came to me after the fact who spent months with surge resources and overtime recreating their digital records from paper receipts. So that is the third option that most people would never want to take, but some are forced into that when they don't have good backups and they can't unlock the files themselves.
Can you elaborate a little bit on not having a good backup? Why would they think that they had a good backup and they didn't? Is that because they thought that they saved it a correct way? Were they using a company that was not good? What happened with that?
Just like anything, there's many different potential scenarios for things to go wrong. One of the things I'll tell you about backups in general is that in the industry, we have a golden rule, if you will, called the 3-2-1 rule. And it says you want 3 copies of your data. So your primary production copy and at least 2 backups.
Right.
So 3 copies of your data in at least 2 different locations. So whether those are, on at least 2 different types of media. So whether that's your hard disk in your computer and an external USB drive, or your server and a cloud copy, but you want them in 2 different locations with at least one of those copies being completely removed from your network and ideally physically removed from the site. So totally offline, totally separate with different authentication methods and everything else to get to it. So by having 3 copies on 2 different types of media with at least one completely removed from the network, you have some reasonable assurance that if you do get a pervasive network infection or have any kind of physical disaster, that at least one copy going to be safe. At 𝗖𝗍, we kind of take that a couple steps further. And so we call it 1-1-0 rule. And the
Okay.
and the added one is saying that at least one of those copies needs to be completely immutable, which means that the backups themselves, once written, cannot be edited, cannot be overwritten or changed, basically can't be tampered with in any way. And then the 0 is that you have to make sure you have 0 errors. So one of the ways that a lot of backups go wrong is that people set it and forget it. And so, oh, I have this automatic backup job and I trust that it's backing up all my data every night. But depending on how it was originally set up and how the software underlying it works, you may find that new files that you've added to your computer since the backup was set up are not included. So you have these gaps in coverage. If you have full computer backup, that's not an issue because those will take an entire, image of your machine and everything on it. But so it all comes back to the type of backup method you're using, the quality of the software, and frankly, the quality of the monitoring of those backups. So you need to make sure that there's no errors, and you need to periodically test the backups to make sure that they're recoverable. Because just like anything, you can have data corruption on stored files. So you want to verify that not only your data is recoverable, but you as a business owner understand the procedures and the steps to go through in order to do that recovery. Because when you're in a panic scenario, right, and your adrenaline is high and you're rushing frantically to try to figure things out, and how am I going to keep supporting my business when I'm down for hours, days, weeks, it's much better to have a documented process and having gone through those steps before. It makes recovery a lot smoother and a lot faster.
Excellent, excellent. And so speaking of documented processes, how did you come up with the system that you just mentioned of how you check out your backups? How did you come up with that system? Is that over years of testing out what the best way to do that is, or?
Just like anything, over the years, we've definitely learned from our own experiences of helping thousands of customers. So there is a bit of experience and knowledge that helps you when you see maybe a new scenario that you've not encountered before, right? So dealing with the unknown. Some of it, though, is just good practice. So, just like each of your CEOs is an expert in their field, and they have the depth of knowledge around what's the best practice and what's the best way to do their craft. For us, we're data security and storage experts. So well known within the industry is, these are the things that, especially for today's ransomware attacks, which are much more dynamic and much more pervasive than they ever were, some of these additional measures that one needs to take in order to preserve and ensure the quality of those backups, the integrity of that data.
Nice, very nice. Okay, so my next question is definitely, as far as the data security that a small business should have in place already, we've discussed backups that we offsite that they need to have, and they need to have some sort of virus malware on their computer that is alerting them if they download something or if something's. Is there any other type of data security software that does something else that we haven't mentioned that people don't know that they should have?
Yeah, so I'll take a minute actually right now to maybe dive deeper on the anti-malware thing for a second.
Okay, cool.
Because one of the things I get asked a lot is, well, if I have antivirus running on my computer, I should be all set, right?
Right.
And the answer is a little bit of yes and a little bit of no. So there's two flavors of antivirus, anti-malware software. And I like to call them kind of the old school method and the new school method. And the old school method, which is more common in consumer grade antivirus products, and especially anything that gets packaged free with a new computer that you buy or with your internet subscription from your cable provider, is going to be signature based, which means that over all of the incidents of viruses and malware and things like that, security companies amass a database. It's giant database of essentially the unique fingerprint that each one of these pieces of malware has. And so by logging and cataloging these signatures, when you download a suspicious file, it's going to scan, or when you download any file, it's going to scan that file looking for these digital fingerprints, these signatures.
Okay.
And if it sees any of them, it's going to flag it as either a known bad thing or maybe a suspected bad thing. And it's going to quarantine it and ask you what you want to do with it. And that works great for stuff that's been out in the wild for a while, right? And so it's made its way into this database. Newer school software, though, addresses a different type of threat, which is called a zero-day threat. And that's where there are vulnerabilities in Windows, in Microsoft Office, in Adobe, like a software platform. Right. And that platform might be brand new because they just released an update or a new patch, so there's new code out there. Or it can be from years and years and years ago. But either way, it's a newly discovered vulnerability that has not yet made it into those signature data. And people are exploiting them, right? Bad guys are smart, and they know that if well-known vulnerabilities have patches available and antivirus and everything can detect them, then what they're going to look for is new exploits that they can use to their advantage. And so in order to detect and combat those new things that might be being seen for the first time or within the first couple of days, you need AI-driven anti-malware. So that's where we have artificial intelligence.
Oh, AI-driven.
Yeah.
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah.
That's new.
Behavioral-based detection. So based on patterns of what malware and malicious software typically do on a device, this newer software can actually see, this new file or executable that you downloaded is trying to do these things that are a little bit suspicious. I'm going to go ahead and block it because the behavior is an indicator of a problem or a potential problem. Okay. Wow. That could be a little bit more cutting edge, more advanced, catch more threats than a purely signature-based approach. So,
I didn't even know that was available. That's crazy.
You would be amazed at how quickly the advances, especially in the cybersecurity space, have come in the last couple of years. Everybody right now is embracing the term big data, and how do we leverage all the data we have about all this activity on the internet, on devices, behavior of software, and use that to teach machines, they call it machine learning, what to spot. So it's like facial recognition. Based on 1,000 images of this type of thing, and you train the software, right? These are all images of dogs. Then it knows it kind of knows what a typical dog looks like. And then you put new images, and it can reasonably reliably detect, okay, like this picture has a dog in it. So that's amazing kind of stuff that you can do these days. But in this case, we're talking about detecting potentially malicious software. Right. And you asked earlier about other tools that small businesses use. And I think one of them that I've actually been talking to a lot of owners about recently is a smart firewall. So now that everyone has moved to remote work and you're often sharing your network connection with other people in the household, teenagers, children, other folks who may not have the same level they may not have the same level of security awareness, right, that we do. It is so important to have some level of network detection, right, network level firewall for your household. And one of the reasons I would say that is, a lot of people are using, routers from Comcast, where they're not changing default passwords. They're not patching them. They don't realize that your Wi-Fi router is broadcasting the Xfinity Wi-Fi signal out of your house. So you're actually participating, and people are using a portion of your bandwidth for their own Xfinity Wi-Fi as they drive down your street or sit in your So it's things like that that people just don't realize. And so when you start doing business out of your home on a primary basis, you really want to make sure that you're stepping up your level of network security. So a smart firewall sits at the entry point of the internet to your home. And so all of your devices and all of their activity with the internet to, sending data to and receiving from, passes through this device. And similar to how anti-malware works, it knows known bad IP addresses and known bad behaviors and will automatically block certain requests that it knows are atypical. And so as a user, you have a chance to then allow those things, just like you do
Right.
to unquarantine stuff in your antivirus software. But it gives you this added layer of protection where there might be rogue programs, or you might have viewed malvertisement, so malware embedded in ads on web pages that
Really? Oh my gosh.
And so, having a smart firewall at the network level helps prevent those things from communicating out and beaconing out to their home servers.
Wow.
My smart firewall actually has a really cool dashboard that I always show everybody that, in the course of a 30-minute phone call, it's blocking like 1,000 active threats, scans of ports, and attempts to connect into devices on my network. It's unreal when you actually see the data.
Wow. I'm sure that is probably pretty crazy to see, like it actually attacking like while you're just sitting. That's crazy. I didn't even realize, I realized for the Comcast thing that, that people using the Xfinity Wi-Fi are using your data. I realized that recently, actually, but to think about it in those terms of how open you are to being susceptible to everything that's happening with people just driving by, like that's crazy to really think about how unprotected you are. I mean, that kind of segues into another question I wanted to ask about, do we need data security on our cell phones? Are they equipped with data security? Are you supposed to be downloading all of these apps that say that they're secure in your phone?
So yes and yes and yes. Okay. The mobile device market is a lot less mature than the desktop, laptop market. So there are mobile device security tools out there. There aren't, I don't have any in particular that I recommend to clients, but what I would say is, and because it varies iPhone versus Android, et cetera, but there are definitely security tools that you can install. The other thing is I'm a big proponent in really basic protections. So everything from making sure you have a good password, so it's actually your mobile phone is password protected. You have a decent strong password, that you don't save all of your credentials, like keep me logged in, or those types of settings, that you use a real password manager for that kind of stuff. So I think that's something you should do, whether it's on your mobile phone or on your PCs. But the biggest thing for mobile devices is where you download your apps from. So I have an Android, for example, and the Android market there's a lot more options for where different Play stores and things where you can download apps. And I have my phone restricted where I'm only allowing it to download from the Google Play Store. And it doesn't mean that every single app in the Google Play Store is good, but it does mean that there is at least a more rigorous security review, and it is less likely that you're going to download a bad app. But it happens. There are malicious apps detected all the time that then get revoked, right? They get pulled from the App Store, but sometimes not before people have downloaded them. So I would be selective in your choice of apps and what you download. Usually ones that are from well-known brands that have millions of downloads and have very high ratings are pretty safe. I get a little more nervous when you look at something from a smaller manufacturer. Aren't very good or things like that. And then I'm trying to think. The other thing I would say too is, the biggest risk, honestly, for mobile devices is frankly you losing them, and therefore someone else gaining access to all of the data that's on that phone and all of the accounts that you may have been logged in as. So the storage on the device is another easy way that you can put an additional layer of protection, on the data that sits on your phone.
Okay, yeah. All right, that's really good information. Nice. Okay. What other questions? Let me see if I have any questions online real quick before I continue asking you questions of my own interest. Let's see. Okay, I don't see any questions yet, but anyway, so we're just going to continue. As far as like, let's see, is there something that I haven't covered that I haven't asked a question about that you think is pertinent for everyone to be privy to? Because I think sometimes there are like, I'm just a regular small business owner, so I don't really know like what kind of data security terms there are other than, you know, my regular everyday encounters. So I wonder if there's something from your professional side that I'm missing that we should be telling everyone that they should know.
I think we covered the majority of the bases. I bounced around a lot, but I think that, you know, there's probably a top 10 list of simple, basic things that you can do on your PCs, your phones, your network, right? That are going to help protect you. Right. Anything more fancy than that, so kind of if you get to items 11 through 20, right, they're probably going to be a little bit more complex to implement, potentially a little bit more expensive, and maybe not necessary for small business. So I'm a firm believer in, you know, starting with the basics, and if you've got the basics down, then let's have a conversation to say, okay, here's everything you have. Are there any, you know, doors and windows that we've still left open? But 99% of the business owners I speak to have not yet implemented one of the things we've already talked about.
Right. Yeah. Not even one. Right. They're very behind. So
none of them at all. The only thing I mentioned it quickly is a term called MFA, multi-factor authentication. Back to user accounts and passwords that are easily compromised and or stolen, right? And sometimes
right.
Not of any fault of your own, but because a website that you use has been breached. One of the ways to combat that is the use of multi-factor authentication. And so anyone who does online banking is probably already familiar with the process. Where to log in, you would provide your username and password, and then either a 6-digit code that is either on a code generator on your phone, or is SMS to you.
Right.
So multi-factor authentication just means that you need multiple factors, so multiple things in order to log in, and that's usually a combination of something you know, which is your username and password, and something you have, which is that code. And so between those two things, it is more likely than not that you truly are the user you purport to be. Now, there are crazy stories out there of criminals who have gone to all lengths to call people's cell phone provider and reassign SIM cards to different accounts, to call people's banks and impersonate the user so that when they try to make a fraudulent transaction and the bank calls that person, either they're calling the bad guy or the bad guy's calling the user saying, oh, I'm from your bank.
I've seen that.
It's absolutely nuts, the lengths that people will go to when they think they have a big fish on the hook.
Right.
So not to say that more complex attacks don't happen and don't happen to small business owners. But just like anything, risk is a combination of impact and likelihood. So when you have a limited small business budget, right, kind of back to where we started, you have a finite pool of resources that you can invest in security for yourself. And you have to weigh all of the possible tools and things that you could be doing against if any one of those things went wrong, what's the impact it would have to your business and to your data and to your privacy and the protection of any consumer information you might have in your business.
Right.
And then also, what's the likelihood of that actually happening to you? And so you kind of weigh the two, and there are things that you can do to reduce that inherent risk, and that's, you know, anti-malware software, good password controls, things like that. And they'll never completely eliminate the risk, but the goal is to reduce it to an acceptable amount, where you say, okay, I can live with spending this much amount each month on my security and dealing with and managing, you know, this level of tooling and tools and things that I have to do, for this level of residual risk. And that's kind of the equation that even large companies use to prioritize their budgets and where they focus their time and spend their money.
Right. Okay. So on that note, how can someone work with you if they would like to enlist your services and get on the ball and actually be securing their data and not be at risk for these types of attacks that we've been talking about?
So I would say the easiest way to reach out to me is either book a meeting, and I can share my link afterwards, or just send me an email. So Cathy@𝗖𝗍.com. I'd be more than happy to have a quick consultation to understand where you're at, what you're worried about, and then come up with a couple of recommendations for what we think we could do. And then you get to decide, right, if that sounds good and you want to work together. That's great. I would love that. But it's not for everybody either. So happy to just spend that time to share a little knowledge and give you a decent game plan. And then we can sit down and talk about what your security and backup needs might be.
Yeah, that would be great. I think a lot of people could really benefit from at least speaking with you and getting to know exactly what their strategic plan can be for data security. It's very, very important. So I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak with you. So we'll definitely have the link here. I'll post it into the comments so that everybody can get it. And of course, everybody can reach out. Cathy's in this group, so you can speak to her there. You can always send her a little message on Facebook. You can email her, like she said, and then always with the link. So unless you have anything else you'd like to add, I think we're good.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I love spreading the message. I love everything that you're doing too. When we first met, I was so jazzed by what you said about, you live to help people systematize their business and automate their process. And I was like, yes, because that's ultimately what we're doing with you as well. But we start with security. We're starting with kind of the helping them with basics. But by and large, my goal is to get all of my clients to be secure and have a strong foundation upon which to build their businesses and then send them over to you.
Right, exactly. That's what we need, a strong foundation, and then we built it up on the strong. That's exactly how I feel about it. You want to always put all the processes and the systems in place as you're going so that you don't have to worry and scramble when somebody's actually trying to steal your data or you're having other problems. And you already have these things in place, so you're not so worried. And that's the whole thing, is the prevention part, just like you said. So I hope everybody takes advantage of speaking with Cathy. She's great, and she will definitely help you with everything. Remember, Cathy Miron, eSilo, and I'll put the link in so you guys can get it later. Okay? Okay, guys, have a great day. Thank you for tuning in with us, and I can't wait to see you on the next one that we do of these Q&As. All right, have a great day.